Welcome back to What's the Skeet. In this episode, we talk to Chris Hall, the passionate driving force behind the Manx Viking Project. Chris was kind enough to give me a personal tour of the site, and let me tell you, it's filled with mystical vision. From plans for a Viking-style longhouse, to a working forge, and a produce shed serving up local soups and local goods. Chris is building something truly special. But it doesn't stop there. He's creating an educational space too. One where school groups can walk through a paddock, dig into history, and connect with Viking culture in a hands-on way. There's even an allotment in the works so the site can grow what it uses, making it as self-sustaining as it is inspiring. So, Chris, what's the skeet, my friend? How you doing?
I'm not so bad, mate. So you summed it up rather nicely there, really. So the plan is to build ourselves the first permanent. I've got to put the word in there, permanent, because I got pulled up on that by a lovely chap who was one of the Odin's Raven crew in the 1979 voyage.
Oh, nice.
Said, we've had several Viking settlements over the years, but none of them have been permanent, and that's our goal here, is to build something that outlives us all and will be there for decades to come, that people can continue to use. So,
Nice.
from an 18-metre long longhouse, blacksmith's forge, a sensory workshop, a Viking farmstead, a Viking stave church. There's going to be so many parts to the project.
And which at the moment is the main focus, would you say? Where at the present are you guys sort of putting most of your effort?
So most of our effort at the moment is in material and fundraising gathering to push the project forward. What we hope to do is build it in such a fashion that the smaller, easier to build buildings we tackle first, as we're all novices at this, with a few expert guidance standing by, and build ourselves up to the main event being the longhouse.
Right. And this is all sort of volunteer led. Then you guys have had one sign up day already?
Yes, we had one in April. Unfortunately, the weather was a bit foul for it. So, but we still got a dozen or so people signing up.
Yeah.
Everybody's a volunteer, even all of the crew on the charity board.
Oh, great.
Nobody's being paid.
Yeah.
So at the moment we're all volunteers.
Best way.
And yeah, the way is to build it up and hopefully get to the point where volunteers can just turn up on the site and get on. They know what they're meant to be doing, and they can just turn up on site.
If they have a free afternoon or something.
Do an hour or something like that, and just
potter
pop in
around
and out as they want.
Yeah, no, I really like that, Chris. It's important for community as well, that sort of volunteering vibe, isn't it? That's what makes the Isle of Man special, in a sense, is how strong our community is and how willing people are to support local sort of products and charities, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, community spirit is a massive part of this project. And it's not just the site once it's built, it's the building of the site that's really important to us and really important to me.
Yeah.
Everybody gets to put their hand to it, and then everybody gets to put their name to it as well, literally
Yes, you were saying.
into the timbers themselves of the longhouse.
You were saying that.
That we will get everybody round who had any part in making it happen, and they all get to put their name on a piece of wood in the longhouse, and then that can be looked at years and years later, and as people grow up and have their own kids, can say, I was part of this, I helped build it.
Yeah, no, definitely, especially if it's permanent, man. It's important for something long-standing to have a bit of heritage behind it itself, isn't it? And those people putting their names on there is very important. But where did the inspiration really start for all this? Where did the idea really cherish from?
I was always, one of my first fancy dresses back in, funnily enough, 1978 or 79, we went on a cruise to the Canary Islands, and obviously I was only 6-7 years old, and it was over Christmas of 1978, I think it was, because my sister was still in a sort of like chair sort of thing. And we had a fancy dress night, and my parents dressed me up as a Viking then. So as a very young age sort of thing, I was I was Vikinging around sort of thing.
That's pretty cool.
But later on, it was nights round a fire, chatting away with people and talking about Manx culture and our heritage and things like that, and then travelling up to places like Orkney and Shetland and seeing how they celebrate their Viking culture there.
How do they celebrate it there?
Very, very well, and with
really?
a lot of passion. It's their Uphellia celebration is absolutely amazing to behold, seeing the whole island descend on their capital, and hundreds, literally about 800 people, all dressed up as Vikings, with torches going through the town,
Right.
and then burning a massive Viking boat that they spend all year building just to burn it during their Uphellia.
Wow.
And then afterwards, the dancing and the rampant drunkenness and everything, all like 6 or 7 generations of families all together, thousands of people all just getting along, no trouble, no fights, no nothing. You know, you'd imagine 800 blokes dressed up as Vikings then going having a few beers would be the cause of disagreements and all sorts, but not a single notion of anybody other than being in great spirits.
They're all just there for the same reason.
Yep. And and I came back to the Isle of Man thinking we've lost our way a little bit because we should be doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, man, I think that's very true.
I mean, you look at the young farmers, for instance.
Yeah.
That's your community spirit right there.
Yeah.
The young farmers is an organisation that breeds working together as a team and brother and sister side by side.
Yeah.
And imagine them being given tasks as young farmers around the island to go, right, so we're going to have this Viking festival. And as young farmers, you have a sworn duty now to represent for your area.
Oh, yeah.
And how you would all work towards that.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone mucking in together is a big part of it, isn't it?
It is a big thing, yeah.
And like if you say, they all build boats to burn, it's crazy, really.
It is, yeah.
When you think about it like that, it is a bit bizarre.
But it's not just one boat. There's then that's the main Uphellia. There's then smaller ones all around the island for another month after that. So when you drive around Shetland through January and February, you will see little Viking boats in in the villages and things like that. And some of them, they actually launch them out to sea and set them on fire and things like that.
Oh, does that mean they're sort of celebrating the pagan ways of that sort of area? Do they dive into that really, or is that sort of pushed to the side?
It's been going on since the 60s. Now, apparently, it came about because that time of the year, the men of the Shetland rioted. They got really, it was sort of coming up to springtime, and for whatever reason, they all got a little bit boisterous, and it was like, we need to focus this energy into something. So that's when the first Uphellia started.
Oh, nice.
Was to stop their shenanigans, but it's become its own set of shenanigans now. And it's,
it sounds like a shenanigan to me. That sounds like a
superb.
real shenanigan.
We gave up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They were still partying.
800. Never mind.
And that
the
was
women.
just 800 squads. You've then got all the actual townspeople as well on top of that. So it's a
that is a do, isn't it?
Yeah, proper do.
I think we might have to get over to that, Herb.
Yeah,
get over there and have a few beers. That's
Just make sure you lead with "I'm from the Isle of Man."
Not England.
Yeah,
they won't like that, will they?
No. Yeah, if you say you're Manx, you'll have every hospitality laid out.
Yes, because we're Viking. We're Viking.
We're
brothers, really.
We're islanders, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think the Isle of Man don't celebrate the Viking ways that much?
Without sounding negative and without criticising, I really don't know. I know when I was younger, there was a lot more community events.
Yeah.
At village halls and things like that.
Like
Sparmelias and stuff. They're now becoming less and less because the island's it's become very commercial. It used to be a fishing island and a farming island. Mm-hmm. And that was our bread and butter. That was our income.
Yeah.
And even up to the early 80s, I remember that, farmers were revered and fishermen were revered and things like that.
Celebrated almost.
And celebrated, yeah. We had harvest celebrations and all that sort of thing. And then when the shift came round to the finance sector and the offshore and everything else, that's where I believe it started diluting down and became more of a niche thing. And as time's gone on, we've replaced an awful lot of our heritage and our culture with granite in the streets and everything else. One thing that broke my heart was to see the Laxey MER station. When they took away the good old gravel that used to be there, and it used to be very rustic and corrugated sheeting and stuff like that. And then they suddenly started replacing it all with all the shipped in granite to make it look exactly the same as Douglas looks and things. And it's
not the idea, is it?
Not really. The same with Castletown.
We do have to be careful we don't take away what makes us special, don't we, here on the Isle of Man?
Yeah.
And I think that's why I like what you're doing, because you're trying to bring us back. Not bring us back, but bring it forward, that old heritage, and try and make it and integrate it back into society again and make it more prevalent, I think.
Definitely, yeah. That's one of my main focuses for this project, is to bring back proper cut through it with a knife community spirit,
Mm.
where people look forward, no doesn't matter where they are on the island. And the whole thing with the Manx Viking Project, if we can succeed with this initial settlement, then maybe down the road there might be somebody in another area who goes, well, I've got some land, what can we do here? And then build another thing there.
Yeah,
and
something
you know,
different.
and start spreading it throughout the island again,
Yeah, no, that's really.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's sort of spread the love in a sense,
Yeah.
spread it out there.
Yeah.
No, that does make sense, Chris. But how do you sort of go about then? How do you so-called sell this to your volunteers when they come to the Viking recruitment day, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
or volunteer day? What do you sort of explain to them, and how do you portray what you're doing so that the audience understand the goal here
Yeah.
and how it's going to develop? What's the end goal? What do you see it looking like, your Viking site?
So the catchphrase for me is by the people, for the people. So we all build this together. I've come up with the idea. I was one of the co-founders of the project. However, that's where my sort of calm and my kudos sort of ends. You know, it's now for everybody on the island to put their mark on it, either in person. You know, there's jobs that need doing on the site. There's things that people could be doing at home, crafting and things like that for the site. Even looking into YouTube videos on how to make Viking clothes and things like that. So there's a multitude of things that people can be doing in the background, or helping us with our social media, or helping with fundraising and things like that.
Yeah.
And that all puts their mark on the project.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
And it's something that will outlive us all. You know, it's something that when you've got kids and they grow up, you can be proud to bring them up there and go, I helped build this. See that post there? It's got my name on it in the date.
Yeah.
I was here when this happened.
Which is cool.
And that's the chaps. I'm fortunate enough to have met a few of the chaps who were actually the original crew on the Odin's Raven back in 1979.
Okay.
And the bond that they formed during that whole project is completely unbreakable. And they all speak so highly of each other, and what they achieved is legendary in my eyes. That was to be Viking. They jumped on a wooden boat in 1979 in Norway. The night they left, there was a massive storm, and there was no internet, there was no GPS, there was nothing to warn
telephones
them.
even.
There just
back
happened to be a fishing boat passing them on the way in as they were going out. They went, "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're heading off into the
That
North
would be a
Sea."
bit of a shock.
And they went, "There's a massive low pressure just formed over the North Sea. You need to get back to shore." And they turned around and went back, but it was 8 hours before the Isle of Man knew whether they were safe or not.
So they were going from Norway to the Isle of Man was the goal.
Yeah, so they had to go up through. They went via St Ninian's oil field, and then carried on up to Shetland, and then from Shetland to Orkney, and then they went round the Hebrides, and then dropped down to the Isle of Man. But they had there was no GPS back then. There was no sat nav or anything like that.
Yeah. What was the goal behind it then?
It was Robin Bigland and a couple of the chaps. I expect it was probably in a pub or something like that, and it was just, we need to do something for Tynwald for 1,000 years. You know, we need to do something special, and they took it upon themselves. It wasn't state sponsored or anything like that. It was all privately funded and privately planned and everything else.
Do you reckon it would be doable these days then?
Health and safety, yeah, it'd be doable, but it certainly wouldn't have the same, the same sort of inherent risk that was involved back then. I mean,
No, that's old school.
yeah, that
isn't it?
boat got scuppered. They went, the boat sank on them, leaving one of the islands.
Really?
Yeah, but fortunately they had like a flotilla of boat locals who were following them out. And when it got swamped, they managed to get a rope on it quickly, get all the lads, because all the stuff went overboard as well. They managed to rescue everybody and tow the boat back into the harbour again. And then they got a local fire brigade down to pump it out and
My God.
and bring it back up again. And then they carried on sailing even after that.
That's a right shocker though. And imagine being in a boat. You're heading off to the Isle of Man from Norway and the damn thing's sinking.
Yeah.
I'd have a panic on me.
Exactly, and the fact that they were, I mean, you've got to remember that some of these crew were ex-military and things like that.
Hard men.
They were made from pretty stern stuff, like, and it's, I don't know whether and that is what it is to be Viking. Anybody who claims to be Viking has to have some form of physical proof that they are willing to put their life on the line for glory or for, word fame and things like that. So the nearest thing we have got to Vikings in this present day are TT riders. You know, you look at the likes of the Crow brothers. They jump on that sidecar. They're two brothers in arms on that bike.
Yeah.
And they are whizzing within inches of Manx stone walls for greatness. And
Fair play to them.
that's what 1,000 years ago, that's what the Vikings were to the Norse people.
Balls
they were
out.
the people who were bored with farming and fishing and
Yeah.
went, we want to do something more. We want to go and see new lands. We want to go and, you know, find our fortune
Oh,
and
yeah.
our fame and, you know,
Adventure.
an adventure, yeah. And they jump on a boat and they sail across the North Sea.
Yeah, that is crazy. And when I came to visit you, I wasn't hesitant to visit you but I didn't really understand why. And once I got there, I understood your vision and sort of how you plan and how you look to it. Talk to me about the walk that you've got going out to the field there. That little lake of paddock we have out there.
So,
What's the idea behind that? Because obviously you've got the site with your longhouse, your forge, your food. What would you call that? Food hut?
It's just a Viking kitchen.
A Viking kitchen.
Rather than giving it like a cafe or anything
Yeah.
like that, it's literally somewhere for a little bit of sustenance. It's not
Yeah.
there's not going to be any bells or whistles or frills or anything like
Homemade
that.
soup of the day, I
Just
think
be
you
a
said,
wooden
didn't you?
bowl and a wooden mug sort of thing, and,
Yeah.
you know, and just grab a bit of food.
Yeah, real old school and self-made in a sense. Doesn't need to be going out buying plastic from China to
No,
have a
exactly.
Viking soup in a bit of old wood that you've carved out. Sounds
Exactly, yeah.
lovely to me.
Yeah.
And then you talk about that walk out. We walked out there. Talk to me through that sort of route. What's
So-
your plan there?
So the Alfar Woods is, again, it's the woodland there is quite special. There's not an awful lot of old woodland in that area. A lot of it's farming land. It just happens that sort of groin of land there was affectionately known by the locals as Cowshit Corner, because the farm above used to sluice all the slurry down into that area,
Right.
because it was just too wet to farm. It was a bog in there. But the previous landowner, while he lived there, he built this track all the way around the woods out of the bog sort of thing, so it's sort of raised out. But because there's so much silver birch in there, when it's windy, everything rocks backwards and forwards through that wood, and you know, it's almost living and breathing when you walk through it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And everybody I know that's spent time on the land with me and stayed there overnight and camped and things like that, they've all come back and said, wow, those woods are absolutely amazing. So it's almost like spiritual. So we decided to call it the Alfar Woods, which is Old Norse for the Elf Woods. So it feels like you're being watched, and you know, there's something
is
going
it
on
creepy?
in there.
Not creepy in a negative way, but it's a
Spooky.
spooky vibe around there. It's a
Yeah.
real bizarre.
Yeah.
What you've got there is a little bit of a. I think it's a special place. It is quite bizarre, Chris. Really. And how do you feel when you're there? Do you
I love it,
Yeah. Do you feel at home there?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I moved out of a big house down in Port Sodrick,
Yeah.
and I then moved off grid 5 years ago, January.
Okay, perfect. Talk to me a little about this off-grid living, Chris. Talk to me a little bit about that. How do you feel, and what are the benefits of it, man? How does it improve your life living off-grid?
Off-grid, I mean, one of the big parts of this project is about mental health. So the chap I bought it off, his mental health was actually very low at the time, because he'd moved there kind of against his will after a bitter divorce. And his mental health over the years had slowly drained away to where he was not in a great place. And likewise, where I was living, I wasn't mentally in a great place. So when we switched positions and I moved onto that land, and he then moved away and got himself a little narrowboat and settled himself back next to his family, both of our mental health lifted back up again.
Yeah.
And I went from not wanting to be at home in my old place to not wanting to leave me home in the new place.
Okay.
So off-grid living it's a beautiful thing if you're willing to take the plunge and put a bit of effort in.
Yeah.
It is very rewarding. I've never felt close to nature. I've never been more mindful of nature and the environment and how everything I do, because on a very small level, everything I do has a potential impact on my environment around me. I see it when I feed the birds. You then get an increase in ringies, because you can't separate one bit of wildlife from another.
Yes.
But then if I stop feeding the birds to stop feeding the ringies, then not only do the ringies then decide, oh, there's no food source, we're going to go elsewhere, but the birds do as well. So I
Right.
then find myself in woods with very few birds in. So I have to make that conscious decision and go, well, I don't really mind about the ringies myself. They are just wildlife.
As long as they're not in your house scratching.
As long as they're not, yeah, exactly. So I built the cabin very, very secure that they can't get into my living space. So having them scratching around outside really doesn't bother me. It does bother some people when they come and visit.
Yeah,
And go,
I mean-
what was that then?
I mean, it doesn't bother. I mean, it does bother me a little bit. That not. It doesn't bother me what you're doing. But if I had a ringies running around outside, I'd be a bit like, maybe I should stop feeding the birds.
Yeah.
Because I'm a bit scared of them. But that's by the by. How it just fascinates me how
But
you're living off
it is all
grid.
just wildlife, so it doesn't bother me. And as I say, they're only very localized in the area where I feed the birds.
Yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
because I mean, like them or not, they're highly intelligent creatures.
Poof, are they?
And like the rest of wildlife, they will only breed as much as there's a food source. They're not going to starve themselves to overbreed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you stop feeding, they stop breeding. And I've actually watched this over the last 5 years with all my wildlife
Yeah.
in the springs and things where I haven't been feeding, every day.
Yeah.
The amount of wildlife in total drops down massively. They go elsewhere where there is food.
It's sort of like an experiment.
It's only humans that just continue to breed and breed sort of thing regardless, past their means. The rest of wildlife know when there's not a decent ecosystem there for them,
Yeah.
they won't breed.
That's crazy. What challenges have you faced whilst living off grid? What sort of trying to keep this not an interview in the sense of me asking loads of questions, but sort of trying to what positives and what negatives have you found about living there?
So the positives are in the thousands. Just waking up, the smell, when there's a frost on the ground and that low-lying mist on the grass and things like that.
Yeah.
Completely unspoilt by humans, and you just walk out to the back field. And, I hate to quote films, but if you've ever watched In Bruges, it's like a fairy tale.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I can see
so
that.
many times waking up and like today, in the sun and everything else, and there's dragonflies out in the back field and things like that, and it's so therapeutic and absolutely amazing just to go out there and switch off for a couple of hours away from everybody. Challenges in the winter, it's a bit more difficult, things like making sure there's plenty of firewood stacked up before the winter starts for the log burner.
Yeah.
Is the main concern.
Right.
Electricity becomes an issue because we run off solar. So because we're south facing the hills, if there's any clouds on the hills at all in the winter, you get no sun. You might not get sun for 2 or 3 days at a time.
Really?
Yeah. So then you have to run the generator up and things like that. So
And that gets costly.
it does, yeah. So there are downsides. But,
Yeah. How often would you say the log burners go in a day then? How many hours?
This time of the year, I don't light it at all now. I won't light it again now till at least September, maybe October.
Yeah.
In November, December, January, right the way through March into April, you've really got to keep it in overnight because you're not in a house with double glazing and bricks and mortar and all the things that will keep a house warm for hours on end, even if there's no heat source. The temperature does drop in the building quite quickly when the log burner's not lit. So, especially because I'm spending most of my days in there, that's also the office for the project as well. That's where I do all the videos and I do all of the planning and everything else. All gets done in that one small building. It's the first thing when you get out of bed is put, hopefully the fire's still in, throw a little bit of kindling on it, throw another log on, and then close all the vents, and and that's it. Then it just
Fingers crossed.
It just sits there all day then and keeps going.
Ah.
If I'm out and about, if I know I'm out for the day, then I probably won't relight the fire.
Yeah, don't want to be using up too much wood.
But I will put a log on it and close the vents in the hope that there's a few embers left when I get home. If I'm going up to Cornay to get wood for the project and things like that. It's pointless keeping the log burner going all day for that, but most of the time in the winter,
it's on.
It's on, yeah.
Right, that's pretty cool, man. If someone came up to you and was from an estate, or if you want to call it not off grid, I don't. What's the term for somebody who doesn't live off? Who lives off grid?
It lives on grid. It's just
on grid.
On grid.
On
yeah,
grid. If someone who lives on grid came up to you and said, "I'm looking to move off grid,"
yeah.
what sort of advice would you give them after your experience?
do it once, do it right. Make sure you've got the funds, the permissions, and everything else. You know, because again, living off grid is frowned on by the establishment.
Yeah. Seems to be.
The land itself needs to be zoned for residential use. Otherwise, you will have no end of trouble with planning and things like that for trying to live off grid. It's a very minimal way of life.
Yeah.
And a very rewarding one, and I don't understand why it's not celebrated by governments. But I don't pay rates, I don't pay electricity bills, you know. So as you can see, you know, it could be seen that I'm not putting into the system, but this project is, for me, putting into the system in a massive way. You know, it'll give a lot more than I ever could via rates and things like that.
But why do you need to put into the system if you're self-sustainable?
Well, we've still got roads, we've still got, you know, but again, I pay me vehicle taxes and things like that. You know, I pay my way, I pay me national stamp, and you know,
you work, you're working on the project. You've got your own day-to-day job or a few times a week job. But why can't the government sort of allow someone to do that?
I don't know whether it's fear. I think the government have got in their head that it will suddenly become like, you know, well, it's one man on the land today, tomorrow it might be 50 hippies, and then there's going to be all sorts of problems, and you know, causing an eyesore and everything else. It's there's got to be a balance there. The government have got to keep things in check.
I wonder where that line is.
I don't know. I mean, this is why caravans have never been allowed on the Isle of Man. There's not actually a law against it, but the steam packet won't let you just bring a caravan to the Isle of Man.
Oh, really?
And it's a bit like we only ever say longtails and ringies, because if we say the R word, you know, the Black Death will make it to the island, because it never did back in 1665.
Did it not?
No, it never made it.
Oh,
to
really?
The Isle of
I never knew that.
And that's where the superstition came from. That's why on the Isle of Man we don't say, you know, we say
we say ringies rather than Really?
So
I did not know that was a thing.
That was spread predominantly by longtails.
Yeah, I knew that bit side of it, but I didn't know that was the root
all
of
over
it.
mainland Britain, but never actually made to the Isle of Man. But
Well,
it's the same
today's
thing.
a learning day.
You know, if you say gypsy caravan, you know, are they all suddenly going to come over to the Isle of Man? Well, they probably can't afford to anyway. They can't afford the tickets to come over in the first place.
It's dear old spot.
But it's a very small island, so these worries shouldn't be such a worry. But I mean, that's more that's a broader thing about the living off grid side of it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll find out in due course.
Yeah.
You know, whether we do get away with it, because I'm currently in a enforcement situation with the Isle of Man government for living off grid. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
It very interesting. It is. And people need to be educated on living off grid, don't they?
They do. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. One of the biggest issues I've got with this growing the population on the Isle of Man is that people come from somewhere like London City, where everything is concrete. There's a few parks and things like that, but generally speaking, it is a city that never sleeps. You know?
It's a shit.
And then they come to the Isle of Man to escape the big city, and then they want to turn the Isle of Man into a smaller version of the big city.
Yes, mate. That's been a reoccurring conversation on this podcast. You know.
You know, is when in Rome is the saying. So when you come to the Isle of Man, accept the Isle of Man for what it is and embrace it, and learn to live alongside everybody on the island in harmony. Don't try and change everything.
Yeah.
Based on your compass of what the island should have, because as somebody I'm only Manx-ish. I was born on the Isle of Man. I'm only first generation Manx, but I'm very, very proud to have been born, you know, very, very lucky to have been born here. And I love this island with all of my heart.
No, I do too.
You know, and yeah, we need to embrace what it is to be Manx, because being Manx isn't a birthright. It's not something, you know, I know people who are from Germany who have settled on the Isle of Man, and they're as Manx as anybody, because their love for this island and the love for what it is and what it represents is what we need. We need ambassadors to keep the Manx in the Isle of Man. Definitely,
because that's what makes us special. And it's something I keep saying, but we are the Isle of Man. We don't need to turn into the UK.
No.
What makes us special here is what makes us different.
Yeah.
And that's why people would want to come and visit. That brings in more tourism because they come somewhere new,
Exactly.
somewhere different.
Yeah.
That's away from Scotland, that's away from the island, that's away from the UK. It's what makes us special.
Yeah. Exactly.
And people need to be educated.
Yeah.
And that also leads me on to the sort of root down education of Viking heritage and what you are trying to achieve through educational purposes. And talk to me a little bit about how children can benefit from what you're doing. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So we picked the Viking era as the best catalyst period. So when you hear of our Gaelic history and our Celtic history and things like that, it doesn't strike the same. You know, it doesn't make people's ears prick up the same way that the Viking period does with everybody. Yeah, exactly. But we don't want to limit the Viking project to just the Viking era.
Okay.
That was only like 200 or 300 years in time, as we know it. We know the Viking culture was about a good couple hundred years before that in Scandinavia. But the first we knew of it was the good old 793 Lindisfarne, you know, and that's when the Viking period in Great Britain started.
Yeah.
And went on till 1066 when it
Diminished.
It just ended. That was that.
I wonder why it was so abrupt.
It was twofold. The pagan religion got indoctrinated into Christianity, and then there was also the ongoing power struggles. So the Isle of Man changed hands several times. Over
it was quite the hot spot back in those days, wasn't it?
Quite the bargaining chip and things like that. But on the educational side of things, we want to celebrate all of our culture, not just not just the Norse culture.
Yeah.
So like last week I went out and I got some some rowan, mountain ash, and I got some sheep's wool and I made some cross kerns and I put one up at the entrance to the project and things like that.
What does a cross kern mean?
The cross kern, it actually goes, there's two rituals. One is the burning of gorse on the last day of April, because obviously the 1st of May then is Beltane. That's the cut point, and it was you burnt gorse to drive out any evil spirits that were on your property or in your house or on your land. And then you put a small pair of twigs of mountain ash, rowan, wrapped with sheep's wool, and you hung that over the entrance to your property to then keep out any new evil spirits coming in during the crossover time. Wow. Because it's obviously it's the equinox when there's more daylight hours in the day than there are darkness. Yeah. And then obviously the winter equinox, it goes back, the switches back over again. So it was all about evicting any evil spirits you've got, and stopping any more getting in as they all run for cover from other properties during that equinox. And
teaching kids about these old school sort of things is cool, eh?
And that predates Vikings by hundreds of years.
Right.
So, you know, but we want to embrace everything. We want to make everybody feel welcome at the Viking settlement. Yeah. And hopefully the longhouse will be filled with laughter and education for many, many years to come once it's built. But teaching kids how to work with their hands, get off their phones, you know, there's no app. There's no app for this. Yeah. You know, you need to actually pick up an axe or a mallet and actually make something. Yeah. But then when you get to make something, it's so rewarding making, especially a tool like a mallet, so easy to make, and then it will last you your lifetime. You can then make other things with that.
Yes. You know? And that's sometimes what children need, isn't it? They need something that's long lasting. You know, your phone dies, our phones run out, our phones one day go. That's not something that stays with us forever. But what you make on a Viking site, like the Viking project, will stay with you forever. It definitely has the opportunity to stay, and that memory of that day when these children go there with school.
Hopefully school trips and things like that. Yeah, we'll have open days as well, and
these sort of things events. Sort of stay with these children. I remember when I went to Castle Rushen and sort of mooched around there. You remember certain parts of it, certain highlights, and they stay with you forever.
Oh, of course they do, yeah.
And that, I mean, the superstition on the Isle of Man is so important in a sense, isn't it?
I would say that the strength of superstition on the Isle of Man is probably only equalled by Iceland.
Really? Is it Icelandic?
Icelandics, yeah, or the Icelanders, yeah. They are so superstitious. They have little elf houses at the roadside that you can go along and you can, leave them a little bottle of whiskey and things like that and ask for good luck and everything else. A
Seriously?
bit like our fairy bridge.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many Manx superstitions which are intrinsically Manx, but they all come from Celtic and Gaelic background, from Ireland and Scotland and things like that.
What's your favourite part of superstition on the Isle of Man, would you say?
I would definitely, from first-hand experience, seeing what happens when somebody doesn't say hello to the fairies, even though that isn't the original fairy bridge.
Yeah, very true. People forget that.
Yeah, but if you've got that faith that I'm not a religious person, but I have faith that there is something goes on that's more than the eye can see.
Agnostic is the correct word, isn't it?
Yeah, that sort of things slot into position when you know you're on the right path. And I've found this several times with this project. I told you this. I don't know whether I did tell you the story about when I met Robin Bigland, who was the chap behind the Odin's Raven. He lent me a copy of the book about the voyage of it. Yeah. And it was signed by a chap called Magnus Magnusson, who was Mastermind, very famous guy back in the 70s and 80s. He hosted Mastermind on TV.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I do know Mastermind on TV.
He was a massive Viking scholar, and he wrote a book called Vikings. Well, he got to know Robin as part of the Odin's Raven project. And when they sailed into Peel Bay on 5th of July 1979, Magnus Magnusson came to the island to meet them on the beach.
Wow.
So I got lent a copy of this book about their voyage, and it was signed by Magnus Magnusson because he was on the island at the time. And a few months later, I was working clearing a house for a friend, Martin Lockwood. He had passed away, and his family asked me to go through and get any personal bits out of the house before it was sold. When I opened a drawer, there was a copy of the book Vikings by Magnus Magnusson in this drawer. And when I opened it, it was also signed by Magnus Magnusson to Martin's father back in 1979 when he was on the island meeting Robin Bigland on the beach for the Odin's Raven.
Isn't it?
And as a bookmark, there was a piece of an envelope in it, which was one of 5,000 that were loaded into the Odin's Raven in Norway and joined the Odin's Raven across the North Sea all the way to the Isle of Man. And there was only 5,000 of them printed. And this particular one was signed by Robin Bigland, who was the guy behind the Odin's Raven. So at that point there, you've got to question the universe and go, man.
That's bizarre. That really is bizarre. How did you have to sit and just think about that for a minute?
I did. For several hours I sat there and thought about it.
That's a bizarre thought.
It was it hit me pretty hard, that, but it made me realise I was definitely on the right path. Because for those things to all come together randomly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is bizarre.
Doesn't really happen, yeah.
That is bizarre. The superstition is Superstition is a weird. Yeah. Sometimes you do think, like, when I don't say, if I forget to say hello to the fairies, I feel weird. I genuinely feel weird.
Yeah.
You know, when you're sat in a car and someone doesn't say hello.
Yeah. You're
just a bit like, are you waiting for them? Are you going to say hello? Are you going to say hello? And then I end up saying, are you going to say hello to the fairies? And like, sorry. And I'm just thinking, you have to do it.
You have to do it. Of course you do.
It's almost like a religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that leads nicely into sort of what makes you you guys are a charity.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay. So how are you guys looking for funding? How are you guys looking for support then? Obviously you have your volunteers. Go into a little bit of what is limiting this project from really striving forwards right now. So how can people help you as much as possible, basically?
Yeah, so the main limiter on the project at the moment is funding. We really hope, even though I personally hate money and I hate that capitalist, what money represents and how it brings out the worst in people. The wealthiest people. Look at Elon Musk. He's the saddest looking bloke on the planet, but also the richest bloke on the planet.
Yeah.
How can anybody with that much money be in such a bad mood all the time? And you see it more often than not, that people who are financially wealthy, there's a thing is rich in gifts, poor in gifts, rich in love, poor in love.
Okay.
And that was a journey that I went through personally, where I was a very highly paid IT professional, but I was arrogant and complacent and didn't have any friends. My life was very shallow. Now I have no money, but I have the love of so many ace people that I can class as friends.
Yeah.
most of which I spent this last weekend with, sat round a fire.
Yeah.
That's my reward. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what puts a huge smile on my face.
Yeah.
Is that, and being able to teach other people that it's okay to just have friends and love people and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's more important to anybody.
I respect that.
But yeah, unfortunately, the better the devil you know, it is funding that's limiting us at the moment, because the majority of our issues are logistics issues. We've got all these materials around the island. We've got people offering stone to us and timber to us, but it's getting it to the site and then getting it prepared so it can actually be used to build with and things like that. And unfortunately, that takes money.
Yeah.
So as an emerging charity, we've only been going just about a year now as a charity.
Right.
We're still finding our way with the fundraising side of things. So we're trying to find people who are interested in investing in a community project that is amongst the purest on the island. As I said before, nobody's getting paid.
Yeah.
My pledge to the project was always, I quit my full-time job to do this. I have to work in a pub 3 nights a week to make ends meet for myself personally.
Yeah.
Is that if I ever did draw a wage off the charity, it would only be whatever the living wage is on the Isle of Man, and nothing more than that, because I don't believe that if you're involved in a charity, you should be profiting from it, and nobody should be profiting from this project at all.
Okay.
I don't mind people making a living.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not, and this is, it's been a bone of contention in the past when people have been advising me about the project in the early days, saying, oh, but you need to cater for this and you need to do that and do it this way and price it like this. It was never what the project was about. It was never about even the money that I've put in. I mean, I've put in nearly £200,000 over the last 5 years, purchasing the land and getting it to the point where it is now. I don't want any of that back. That's a gift to the project.
Yeah.
To something that I'm passionate about, and I know will be rewarding to me in ways that can't be seen on a bank balance.
Right. Okay. That's fascinating. So then, what would make the Viking Project charity different? If people go to fund, that you say you guys need supporting, what would you say to people who would say, why should I fund you?
Everybody on the committee of this charity doesn't need a job. So what I mean by that is we're all doing this in our spare time.
Okay.
My spare time happens to be a lot more than everybody else's, because I quit my full-time job and jumped both feet into the project. Maybe I was a little bit too hasty doing that, but I did it nonetheless. And I lived off savings for a year, what was left of me savings, and then had to start working at the pub to feed myself. Yeah. But at no time have I ever looked at the project as a source of income for me.
Yeah.
I would like it to be that way, so I don't have to keep getting distracted by having to go out and work elsewhere. Because that was the whole reason I quit my job in the first place, was I was losing 40 hours of the best hours of the week, sat in an office, doing computer work.
That's crazy, mate. I just can't picture you being in an office.
Yeah. No, I don't think it.
I can't picture you being in an office. I never knew you. I never knew you before. Doing this, and when I visited now, you just don't strike me as an IT kind of guy.
Have you ever heard the term "your face doesn't fit"?
Yeah.
That was literally me in my job working for the Isle of Man government in their IT department. I didn't fit in there at all. Yeah. I caused them no end of trouble with my arguments and and so on and so forth, and kicking and screaming against things. So I'm sure they were quite happy to see the back of me as much as I was the back of the working for them. But
what makes you different, Chris? If you had to say, if someone asked you what makes the Viking Project, excuse me, different, what would you say?
As far as a charity, it's going to be able to do things in a way that I suppose the word for it is escapism.
Okay.
So if you're an alcoholic, or if you're an ex-prison inmate, or if you're a single bloke who's got mental health issues and things like that, trying to treat those things in a clinical environment, like in an office at Manx Care and things like that.
Yeah.
Puts you in a bit of a situation, sort of not like this, if you know what I mean. You say with the layout of this place, it's on a budget, but the thing is, it's the on a budget that gives it the feel that it's got.
I think it is a strange feeling here, isn't it?
It gives it a comfortable feeling. The old timber beams and things like that gives it that nostalgic. So it brings back a lot of my childhood when you walk into a building like this.
Yeah.
They don't make beams like that anymore.
No.
They don't build buildings like this
Wood
anymore.
wouldn't last that long anymore, mate.
No, that's it. So you imagine this being a therapy session.
Yeah.
In this environment is a lot better than the lino floored, straight white walls office in consultant at Noble's Hospital.
Yeah.
So that escapism, that being able to escape not only our current world but also even our era in its entirety, and go and immerse yourself in something from 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
For a few hours is going to be therapy on its own.
Okay, that's pretty. I didn't expect that answer, Chris. Therapy. I didn't expect that. I think that's a good way of actually. Yeah, I like that, man. That's pretty cool. It's like a therapy. Yeah, because you're away from reality for a while, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the goal that you're trying to provide.
Leave your phone in your car and just immerse yourself in it. You don't need photographs. You don't need to justify or advertise that you've been somewhere and that you've been in a longhouse or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because I used to do that when I was younger. Everything had to have a photograph as proof that I'd been there or I'd done something or for a moment in time. But really, it's all about yourself. If you're comfortable that, I say I've just spent a weekend with some good friends around a fire. Mm-hmm. I took a couple of pictures of the fire to show somebody how to use the type of phone. But none of it goes out on social media. None of it gets shared with anybody. You had to be there. And if you weren't there, then you weren't invited. And if you weren't invited, then it was, because, like I wasn't invited for many years, because you don't make the grade as a human being.
Yeah.
And it's striving to be a better human being that's brought me to where I am now. And I want to try and share that with other people.
Especially on the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
And we've spoke so much about the Isle of Man today, Chris. I think that's sort of a nice way to start wrapping this up, mate. I respect what you're doing. I love the way that community is the community is at the forefront of your view here, and that you're trying to do something for the Isle of Man to hold what makes us special here. I love the Isle of Man myself. I'm a big lover of it. That's why me and Herb do this, because we want to promote what makes the Isle of Man special. People like yourself who are doing this sort of thing. Joe blogs from up the road, if he's got something in his garden that's dead interesting, come and talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Anything along those lines. What's going on the Isle of Man? We need somewhere like this that promotes people like you. They work hand in hand.
They do, yeah.
And I think that's what makes it special.
Well, that's what I mean. This is mutually beneficial for everybody, sort of thing.
Yeah, this is a community feel as well.
And that's what people will get if they come and volunteer, if they want to donate to the project.
Yeah.
Is that feeling that they're putting something, whether it's their time and their effort or their money, towards something that is going to be here for hopefully hundreds of years.
Yeah,
if it's looked after I'm
Fingers
gone,
crossed.
and could it be left in trust?
Yeah.
The land to continue its work.
Fingers crossed.
Is that it will continue to be a place that people can go, oh, you know what? Today's just been absolutely mental. Oh, I'm gonna nip off to Kattegat. I'm gonna nip up to Sandygate. Go and sit up there for a couple of hours.
Get away from it. Away from it all for a bit.
Somewhere, and just
community hub.
Yeah, just somewhere that people. I'll try. We haven't worked out how to open the place up to the public once it's built and things like that. What our opening hours are going to be. They're probably not going to be like strict 9 till 5s or anything like that. But we're hoping that there'll always be a place that people can come to and come and sit down and just take a bit of time out from real life.
That's great, mate. I love that. I really like that. I think that what you're trying to do is great. And what you're doing is good. I mean, the foundation's there, certainly. Yeah. And hopefully now it's just putting it all into fruition, isn't it? Sort of making it happen.
Yeah.
That's your goals now looking forward, isn't it? Is get the ball rolling with your first building now, which is your forge, isn't it? That's the goal?
Sorry.
No, don't worry about it.
Yeah, microphone. No, the first building will be the Viking trading post because we need that as a shelter sort of thing. And what we're hoping to do with the forges is build it from the inside out. So we'll actually build the workings of the forge out in the open and then build the building around it.
Cool.
As we go forward.
Really cool.
So,
and that leads us up nicely to our final question, Chris. I think that, I love what you're doing. So our final question, we ask this at the end of every podcast because we feel like it provides something for the listeners to wait till the end of the episode to hear what I have to say because everyone has different opinions on it.
Okay.
And that question is, we might have covered it. I don't think we've covered it. If you could improve one thing about the Isle of Man, what would it be and why? Have a second to think, have a swig of water if you need. We ask everyone this. It's very much a fun question, so don't take it too seriously. It's a laugh. It's a giggle. It's something for people to be excited about hearing because everyone wants to hear something different, don't they?
I would say our political system is a bit of a closed group. I would like to see Chief Minister being rather than being voted on by the existing politicians. I think we need to bring back hand-to-hand combat for the role of Chief Minister. And they should be able to then be challenged by another MHK during their tenure. I'm not saying to the death. I'm just saying like a wrestling match or something like that. But I would like to see.
Are you being deadly serious?
I'm being absolutely serious. I think the whole parliamentary process has become way too much pomp and ceremony, and there's not enough of our farmer fishermen. You don't see it. When somebody brings something up. I know some of the old men. I mean, Teddy Corran passed away.
He did,
Unfortunately, I went to his funeral. He was a mountain of a man. He was a brilliant farmer. He was a brilliant father and husband and everything else. Bob Comish, his dad Jeff.
Yeah.
These were absolute pillars of our community. Now you put those as politicians in the House of Keys. And when somebody comes up with a stupid idea, it's going, "How on there, fella? You're talking out your ass, boy. There's no way we're gonna have that going here on the island." Yeah. And people should be able to speak their minds as if they're going to and they're going to make decisions about the Isle of Man. So I would like to see, maybe not like the hand-to-hand combat thing, but I would like.
I think that's what
I would like to tear down the pomp and ceremony of our current political structure.
Yeah.
And allow people to properly speak their minds as we speak our minds here.
Yeah, this is an open place to speak,
about the things that affect everybody on our island.
Yeah.
And be able to be passionate about things when we are passionate about them.
Definitely.
And not get trampled down by rules and regulations on how we should conduct ourselves. Because I think that's one thing that we're missing out of policy. I know one of the MHKs is a very good friend of mine. And she is very passionate about the policies that she supports, but she's not able to express that passion, and I think that's something that's missing out of our political. So I would like to see an overhaul of the political system.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there, because that's very interesting. Overhaul of the part. Yeah, I mean, fair play, man. We all have different opinions and views.
I will say this project isn't just me. There is Anita Comber, Martin Critchley, Claire and David Manser. Yeah, are all part on the board. Mm-hmm. They all do a lot of great work behind the scenes, and they're all part of the reason why this came about as well. I'm only the co-founder of it. Yeah, because without these people in my life, I would never have got. The path would never have led me to where we are now. So
thank you very much, Chris.
So massive shout out to all.
Yeah, massive shout out to them. It's been a pleasure having you on. Is there any socials? Where can people find you?
You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, even TikTok now.
I've heard you've been on TikTok, yeah.
All under the Manx Viking Project. You can find us on Google Maps. If you just do a search for Manx Viking Project, the website comes straight up. And on there are pages about volunteering and about donations and corporate sponsorship. Again, companies who want to put their name towards the project. Yeah. We are dealing with a major company at the moment about donating some materials.
Nice.
So again, their name will be put physically on the site to celebrate them as being part of the project as well. So
perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure having you here.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you very
Goodbye,
much.
everybody.